That's actually I told you last podcast several months ago that I had another case study for you. That's actually my case study. A guy named Dakota Meyer, Medal of Honor winner. He's in Afghanistan during people can, if they want to like check this out. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast twice. The first one, I mean, they're both good, but the first one is a banger, like a banger of like, you want to like hear somebody's life experience that's absolutely like inspiring and makes you like think about like what it is to be alive and human. And anyway, okay. So Dakota Meyer, Medal of Honor winner. He's in Afghanistan, and dude, I do not know military stuff, but his troop or whatever, the group of guys that he's with,
or whatever, yeah,
they are one of many let's involved in what's I believe at the time it was known as the biggest ambush in the history of the conflict or Afghanistan war, whatever you want to call it, right? And it was bad, like lots and lots and lots of people died, and Dakota had been detailed just outside of where the fighting started, which at the point he was detailed there was no fighting because this was an ambush, right? But the fighting breaks out and he's detailed outside of the action, and he's kind of like calling in communications and like saying what's going on and like trying to get help to people. And multiple times he says requesting permission to like go in and like help people and like put myself in danger and try and rescue some people or help in whatever way I can. And he's told no, 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 no. And finally he just disobeys orders. He's like, I'm going in, right? And he ends up like going in, and really his mission is to go find his troop, his friends, his loved ones, right? Every time that he sets into that danger, he's setting into, I am looking for my friends. That's where I'm going. But as he goes, every time he gets in there a little bit, this person's injured, needs help, gets him out of there, right? And he goes back in looking for his people, but then he finds another group or people that are injured and he helps them. And then multiple times he's like engaging in combat with like the enemy. At one point he talks about like, just to talk about like the trauma involved. At one point he talks about like he ended up in like a hand-to-hand combat situation with an Afghanistan soldier where he ended up like having to like use a rock to beat the guy to death in order to like that's how personal this got, right? Anyway, goes in multiple times and he never finds his friends. And when he finally figured out where they were, he realized that repeatedly he was within just 100 or 200 yards of them. Like he got that close to him, right? And so he's talking about the trauma and the PTSD of all that.
Yeah. So did they not make it?
None of them. All of them.
So he's got the survivor's guilt then.
Yeah, big time. And he can, as he gets information after the fact, he goes, I was close. I was real close, you know? Anyway, and the most fascinating part of the podcast to me, he's talking about all his journey and healing from this trauma, right? And he gets to a point where he talks about how he has this belief, and the belief is, at the end of the day, I know that my friends died because I wasn't good enough. And like, I remember when he said it in the podcast, like I felt my pullback. I'm like, oh, dude, you're right. And I imagine anyone that hears that has some pullback that goes, right? What's fascinating about it to me is, and then he started to talk about how angry he gets when people try to argue that point with him. When they try to convince him that it's not his fault, he gets angry, right? So for me, like from a therapy standpoint, you're wasting your time trying to convince him that it's not his fault. And I think that the way that he tells that story, it speaks to that belief that it is his fault is serving a very critical purpose in his morality, in his ego, in his self, right? And I get really fascinated by that. Like, why would we actively fight to believe that it was his fault? Like, assuming that it's not just weird, like people dismiss things like we don't work. I think we do work. I think like our brains do work. So I think that that's serving a purpose for him. And I just endlessly, I have like one thought of like a hypothesis of what purpose that might serve. But more so, I like talking about the concept of clinging to something that I think everyone would agree. One, dude, his friends aren't dead because he was too weak. I think anyone that heard that story would be like, dude, you're a Medal of Honor winner. You saved many lives that day. You put yourself at risk in horrific ways. And like, it was
You
bigger
did the
than
best you could.
you did the best you could. And it wasn't a failure. It was, it wasn't a failure. And so why would he cling to that? Why would he get so mad when people try to talk him out of that belief that it was his failure and that's why his friends died?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's probably serving some kind of purpose for him. But I mean, it's also interesting why, like I mean, I think anybody that would hear it, like you'd have, like you said, you probably have that impulse to try to talk him out of that. But it's also, I don't know. It's like I was reading this parenting book and it's talking about like how to talk to kids. And one of the things it was saying is just like acknowledging where they are emotionally. It's like, don't try to resolve their situation. Just try to meet them like where they are. And if you like actually just like really listen and don't try to solve their problem for them, they'll start to come to it on their own. But he's like,
Yeah.
but in parenting, you so often like you want to, so like, you know, like, like if one of the kids says like, no, this person didn't want to play with me on the playground. You can easily be like, well, there's other kids. Just go play with other kids. Who cares? That person's probably a jerk anyway, so they don't want to play. Like,
Yeah.
you can resolve it very, very fast. But there's like a hurt that's there, that's legit. You know? And so, like feeling rejection at a young age when you're trying to make friends, like that's a big deal. It's a big deal to them. Like that's their world.
Yeah.
And I can look at it and be like, dude, you're not even going to remember these kids. You won't even remember them when you grow up. Like this is like so inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. And I could try to explain that to them, but all they know is that kid didn't want to play with them. They made an effort and that person rejected them and it hurt.
Well, and what I'm hearing is you're staying alive and you're being curious about their experience. Like, it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense to you as a grown adult.
Yeah,
It matters
it's their life.
it's hard for them as a child, right?
Right. Well, and you want them to be able to learn their own lessons. It's like, yeah, you want to be part of it and help guide it in some way, but it's like, if you just dismiss like the emotion that they feel, like they're not going to feel safe to talk to you. They're like, oh yeah, like,
well, we missed it.
Dad's just going to always say this. He's just going to always be like, he's going to dismiss it, say it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. But
yeah, I think that you missed it in that case. And, even if we tie that back, as you share that story with, of like, you take, it's interesting because I took like a really big grandiose story and you tied it down to a very small, everyday, simple experience of a small child. But if we go back, what I thought was interesting is, you're not seeing their experience. You're just seeing your interpretation of their experience, and you're actually responding to you. You're going, well, I think you're being silly. Like, you'll make other friends, right?
Yeah.
So you're not seeing
I know
them.
this
You're
because I was able to. I got rejected on the playground, but I found other friends and I grew up and blah, 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 and all this. So you have all of that, like all of your experience.
that same thing kind of plays out with the Dakota Meyer story when people go, well, it's not your fault. They're responding to their own experience and their own interpretation. They look at it and they go like, it's not your fault and you shouldn't feel bad about that. And because I'm an empathetic person, I want you to agree with me. But we're losing the curiosity of going, well, why do you think that is?
Well,
And like staying in the emotion with them.
but is it, yeah, because is it like that person that's hearing that story, are they hearing him in the hurt of it, or does that story just make them so uncomfortable that they have to try to resolve it? And then it's
Yeah.
not about actually helping him. It's actually about like trying to help themselves because that story makes them uncomfortable.
I do think like for someone who like, and I know you've put a lot of your life into like reaching out to others when you worked at Anasazi and in many other ways, you've done this a lot, but I do think when I think about me as a therapist or working at Anasazi or the times in my life when I was in that role, uh, man, people appreciate it if you'll just sit down in the pain with them and say, you're right. You're right. This is hard.
It was, I mean, it was one of the first things that I had to learn at Anasazi because it was like, they have like this thing where it's like, I am not the healer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, that's fine and all, but I came there to this job to help these kids. And in like my first week, like, I don't know, like I'm exaggerating this a little bit, but to make the point, like I thought it was going to be like they were going to like we'd sit around this campfire and I would say these wise things and it would turn their life around and yada yada. But they didn't want that wasn't the case.
It was for me, Brett. That's exactly what happened.
Well,
You
probably
sat down.
you're probably further along in this, but it's like for me it was like
I'm saying
it
when
wasn't
I'm
until
with
I
people,
was like,
this
shut
solves
up,
everything for
Brett.
me.
Yeah, no, it's like, shut up. Like, just like, they don't want to hear what you have to say. They've been told what to believe and what to do, like, their whole lives. They don't need more of that. And when I would
Yeah.
actually shut up and, like, listen to them, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, then amazingly, people want to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, or you don't even have to say anything. You can just sit with somebody and they can talk about their life and their struggles and you can listen in a way that they can come to their own conclusions.
Dude,
And I think that that's probably why that guy gets mad.
yeah.
Because it's like, you're not hearing me. I'm
Yeah.
hurt. I'm in pain. And
I
because
failed.
you're uncomfortable by my story, you're trying to ease your own discomfort. And so, yeah, it's going to probably trigger him and he's going to get upset.
But if you could sit with him in it and just be curious, is it possible
Dude,
that over
what's that
time,
like to lose all your friends?
yeah, and
But
is it
that's a hard
possible that
question to
over
ask.
time, yeah, and is it possible that over time, all of a sudden it would make sense why somebody might not just feel that way, but need to feel that the reason they died was because he was too weak, that it was his failure that killed his friends? Would you all start to understand that if you could like just slow down a minute and sit in it with them? You know what I mean? Anyway, that's I think that's how you do therapy. Learn
Yeah.
those skills.
I mean, if you're good at it, if you're good at therapy, like that's what you would do. Or if you're good as a friend or as a parent, you know. But it's like it's hard to combat that impulse.